The blood-red horizon stretched across the rugged Nevada landscape, as Olivia Jameson felt the sting of fresh cuts on her bare feet. Running from Blackwell's gold exchange, she clutched a torn shawl around her shoulders, the auction receipt still crumpled in the hand of the man who had purchased her like cattle. She had fled while he was distracted counting his gold, slipping away into the twilight like a shadow, knowing that if she didn't escape now, she would be trapped forever. Nevada Territory, 1871. The mining town of Panamint Valley was a harsh place for a woman alone. Olivia had arrived just 3 weeks prior, answering an advertisement for a teaching position that had proven false upon her arrival. With her money quickly depleted, and no way to return east to her late parents' home in Boston, she had found herself in desperate circumstances that had led to her standing on that auction block, sold to satisfy debts she'd accrued while stranded. Her lungs burned as she ran toward the outskirts of town, the distant hills her only beacon of hope. Behind her, angry shouts grew louder. Theodore Mallory, the mine owner who had paid $300 for her domestic services, was not a man accustomed to losing his investments. "Get that girl," Mallory's voice carried on the wind. $50 to the man who brings her back." Olivia's heart pounded against her ribs as she spotted a small barn at the edge of town. With nowhere else to hide, she slipped inside, praying to find it empty. The heavy scent of hay and horses filled her nostrils as she frantically searched for a place to conceal herself. Footsteps crunched in the dirt outside, and she dove behind a stack of hay bales, curling herself into the smallest shape possible. The barn door creaked open and a tall figure entered, silhouetted against the dying light. Olivia held her breath, squeezing her eyes shut as the footsteps approached her hiding place. "I know you're in here," a deep voice said quietly. "I saw you run in." Olivia's whole body trembled as a man with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of storm clouds knelt beside her hiding place. His weathered hat was pulled low over his brow, and the silver spurs on his boots jingled softly as he moved. "Please," she whispered, tears streaming down her dirt-streaked face. "Please don't take me back to him." The man studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, surprisingly, he nodded toward the rear of the barn. "There's a trap door under that stack of feed bags. It leads to a root cellar. Get in there and don't make a sound." Olivia hesitated, uncertain whether to trust him. "Now," he urged, already moving to rearrange the hay to hide the evidence of her presence. "Mallory and his men will be here any minute." She scrambled toward the spot he'd indicated, finding the wooden handle of the trapdoor just as he'd described. It opened with a groan, revealing a dark space below. With one last desperate look at the stranger, she lowered herself into the darkness. Above her, she heard the barn door slam open and the voices of several men. "Quinn," a harsh voice barked. "You seen a woman run past here, dark hair, blue dress, probably looking like she's running from the devil himself." Quinn. That was the cowboy's name. "Can't say that I have, Mallory," the man responded, his voice casual and unhurried. "Been brushing down my horse for the past half hour. Something wrong. That little school teacher who came in on the stage last month. Just paid good money for her at Blackwell's to work my household, and she ran off before the ink was dry on the bill of sale." Olivia shuddered at the way Mallory described her like property, not a person. "Women," Quinn said with a manufactured chuckle. "More trouble than they are worth, I always say. That's why I stick with horses." "You'll keep an eye out?" Mallory asked. "Sure thing. Though if she's running through open country at night, the coyotes might find her before your men do." The barn fell silent for a moment before Mallory spoke again. "Search the barn anyway, boys. Leave nothing unturned." Olivia pressed her hand against her mouth to stifle her breathing as heavy boots stomped around above. She could see nothing in the pitch-black cellar, but she could hear everything: the scrape of hay bales being moved, the thud of bags being checked, the growing frustration in the men's voices as they found nothing. "Waste of time," one of them muttered. "She's probably halfway to Carson City by now." "She'll be back," Mallory declared with chilling certainty. "Where's she going to go? No money, no horse, no friends. She'll crawl back when she gets hungry enough." Their footsteps retreated, and the barn door closed with a decisive thump. Still, Olivia remained frozen in place, afraid to move, afraid to breathe. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours before the trapdoor finally opened, and Quinn's face appeared in the opening. "They're gone," he said, extending his hand to help her out. "But they'll be back." Mallory doesn't give up easy on things he thinks belong to him. Olivia took his hand, letting him pull her up from the darkness. In the lantern light, she could see him clearly now, a man perhaps in his late 20s, with a strong jaw shadowed with stubble and eyes that seemed to hold more depth than his rough exterior suggested. Quinn Anderson, as she would later learn, was a horse trader who supplied mounts to the mines and stagecoach companies throughout the territory. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why did you help me?" Quinn turned away, busying himself with securing the barn. "I've seen Mallory's idea of domestic service before. The last woman didn't survive the year." A chill ran through Olivia's body. "What will happen now? He'll keep looking for me." "Yes, he will." Quinn paused, seeming to weigh his options. "There's a supply wagon heading out to my ranch at first light. I can hide you under the canvas until we're clear of town. After that—" He shrugged. "My place is remote, 20 miles out near the foothills. You'd be safe there until we figure something better." "Why would you risk this for a stranger?" Quinn's expression hardened. "Let's just say I've got my reasons for not being fond of men who think they can buy and sell people." That night, Olivia slept fitfully in the barn loft, wrapped in a horse blanket Quinn had provided. Before dawn, he woke her with a gentle hand on her shoulder and a finger to his lips. Below, his ranch hand was loading the last of the supplies into the wagon. "Jeb doesn't know you're here," Quinn whispered. "Better that way. Less complicated for everyone." He helped her into the wagon bed and arranged canvas tarps and empty burlap sacks to conceal her. "Stay still, stay quiet," he instructed. "It's about 3 hours to the ranch. Can you manage that long?" Olivia nodded, her throat tight with fear and gratitude. The journey was agonizing hot, airless, and punctuated by heart-stopping moments when the wagon was stopped twice by Mallory's men searching for her. Each time, Quinn's easy manner and casual conversation turned them away. By the time the wagon finally rolled to a stop and Quinn pulled away the canvas, Olivia was drenched in sweat and trembling from the strain of remaining motionless for so long. "Welcome to Sidewinder Ranch," Quinn said, helping her down. "It's not much, but it's far from prying eyes." The ranch was modest, but well kept: a main house built of sturdy logs, a large barn, corrals filled with horses, and a bunkhouse for the handful of men who worked the place. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still holding the last of winter's snow despite the late spring warmth. "You'll stay in the main house," Quinn told her, leading her inside. "I've got a spare room. Used to be my sister's before she married and moved to Sacramento." The interior was surprisingly comfortable, with solid furniture, a stone fireplace, and shelves lined with books, more than Olivia would have expected in a bachelor cowboy's home. "You raid?" she asked, running her fingers along the leather spines. "Winter nights are long out here," he replied with a hint of defensiveness. "A man can only play so many hands of solitaire before his mind starts to wander. Over the next few days, Olivia settled into a cautious routine at Sidewinder Ranch. Quinn had introduced her to his small crew as his cousin from back east, come to recover from an illness. The men seemed to accept this explanation without question, though Olivia noticed that Jeb, the older ranch hand who had driven the wagon, watched her with curious eyes. On her fourth morning at the ranch, Olivia was helping in the kitchen when Quinn entered, his expression grave. Mallory's men were asking questions at the Johnston place about 10 miles south, he informed her. They're working their way through every homestead and ranch in the area. Won't be long before they come here. Olivia's hands stilled over the dough she'd been kneading. I should leave. I've put you in enough danger already. And go where? Quinn demanded. You'll never make it to the next town without supplies and a horse, neither of which you have. I can't stay here and bring trouble to your door, she insisted. You've been kinder than I had any right to expect, but what if you were my wife? Quinn interrupted. Olivia stared at him, certain she'd misheard. I beg your pardon. Not really, he clarified hastily, a flush creeping up his neck. But if they believe you're my wife, they'll have no reason to connect you with the woman Mallory's searching for. It would explain your presence here. You want me to pretend to be your wife? Olivia repeated, trying to understand. Quinn removed his hat, twisting the brim in his hands, the first sign of nervousness she'd seen from him. Just for appearances. When Mallory's men come around asking questions, you'd have a new name, a reason to be here that doesn't invite suspicion. It was a practical solution, Olivia had to admit, and yet the idea of claiming such an intimate connection with this man she barely knew made her pulse quicken in a way that had nothing to do with fear. What would I be called? She asked finally. Olivia Anderson, he replied. Unless you'd prefer something else. The name settled over her like a new garment, strange but not unwelcome. No, that would be fine. Quinn nodded, looking relieved. We'll need to make it convincing. There's a wedding band in my mother's jewelry box. It should fit you well enough. And we'll need to move your things into the main bedroom. Olivia felt heat rush to her face. Surely that's not necessary. No one will be inspecting our sleeping arrangements. In small communities, people notice details, Quinn countered. If Mallory's men talk to any of the hands or neighbors, the story needs to hold. I'll sleep in the chair by the fire. You'll have the bed to yourself. 2 days later, the fiction became necessary. Olivia was hanging laundry in the yard when the sound of approaching horses made her stomach clench with dread. 3 riders approached the ranch house, dust billowing behind them. One she recognized immediately as Arnold Pierce, Mallory's foreman, a man with a reputation for brutality. Quinn emerged from the barn, walking with deliberate casualness toward the visitors. Olivia forced herself to continue pinning sheets to the line, though her hands trembled so badly she could barely manage the task. Afternoon, gentlemen, Quinn called. Something I can help you with. Pierce dismounted, his eyes already fixed on Olivia. Anderson, didn't know you had a woman out here. Quinn moved subtly to position himself between Pierce and Olivia. My wife isn't accustomed to unexpected visitors. Pierce, state your business. Pierce's eyes narrowed. Wife. Never heard you were married. Been keeping to ourselves, Quinn replied evenly. Olivia, darling, would you mind fetching some water for our guests? Riding in this heat must be thirsty work. Olivia recognized the strategy, getting her away from their scrutiny while reinforcing their supposed relationship. Of course, husband, she managed to say, hoping her voice sounded steadier than she felt. As she retreated toward the house, she heard Pierce explaining their presence. Looking for a woman who stole from Mr. Mallory back in town. Dark-haired, pretty, Eastern accent, calls herself Olivia Jameson. Might have passed this way. Quinn's response was lost as Olivia entered the house, her heart pounding. She filled a pitcher with water from the pump, taking longer than necessary, trying to compose herself. When she returned to the yard with a tray of tin cups, the conversation had shifted. "Might be convinced to pay for information," Pierce was saying. "Real generous when it comes to getting back what's his." "Haven't seen any strangers," Quinn replied. "Just me, the wife, and my men here, but we'll keep an eye out." Pierce's gaze shifted to Olivia as she approached. "Madam, when did you arrive in the territory?" "Can't say I recall seeing you in town." Before she could respond, Quinn stepped in. "Olivia's been here nearly a year now. We were married in Sacramento, where my sister lives. Haven't had much cause to visit town since then. Olivia prefers the quiet of ranch life, don't you, dear?" Olivia offered the tray of water cups, forcing a smile. "Indeed, though I do miss proper company sometimes. Perhaps you gentlemen know of any social gatherings coming up. It would be lovely to meet more of our neighbors." It was a calculated risk what frightened woman on the run would seek out social occasions, but it seemed to work. Pierce's suspicious expression faltered slightly. "Can't say that I do, madam," he answered, taking a cup. "Though there's usually something for Independence Day at the Panamint Meeting Hall." The men didn't linger long after that. As they rode away, Olivia's knees finally gave out, and she sank onto the porch steps. Quinn sat beside her, not touching but close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. "You did well," he said quietly. "They'll be back," she whispered. "Pierce didn't believe you." "Maybe not entirely," Quinn agreed, "but he's got nothing to prove otherwise. For now, we've bought time." That evening, after a tense dinner where neither of them ate much, Olivia helped Quinn move her few belongings into the master bedroom. The space was simply furnished but comfortable, dominated by a large bed with a handmade quilt. "My mother made that before she passed," Quinn explained, catching her looking at the intricate pattern. "She taught my sister, but never had a daughter-in-law to pass the skill to." Something in his tone made Olivia glance at him. "You never married? A man with a successful ranch like this?" Quinn shrugged. "Never met a woman who wanted this life. It's hard country out here, isolated, rough. Most women with sense prefer town living with neighbors and society." "I think it's beautiful," Olivia said honestly. "There's a freedom here I never felt back east." Their eyes met briefly before Quinn looked away, clearing his throat. "I'll get some blankets for myself. The chair by the fire is comfortable enough." That night, lying in Quinn's bed surrounded by the faint scent of him on the pillows, Olivia found herself thinking about the strange turns her life had taken. A month ago, she had been a respectable school teacher with prospects. Now she was a fugitive, hiding on a remote ranch, pretending to be married to a man she barely knew, a man who had risked everything to help her. Outside the window, coyotes called to each other across the valleys. The wild, mournful sound reminded her of her own isolation. Yet strangely, she didn't feel alone. As spring melted into summer, Olivia found herself settling into life at Sidewinder Ranch. The ruse of marriage became an unexpectedly comfortable arrangement. She took over the cooking and household management, skills she'd learned from her mother years ago. Quinn, in turn, seemed to appreciate having someone to talk with in the evenings, discussing books they'd both read or sharing stories of their vastly different upbringings. They maintained separate sleeping arrangements, with Quinn continuing to bed down near the fire, despite Olivia's protests that he should reclaim his room. "A man's word is his bond out here," he'd said firmly. "I promised you'd be safe, and I meant it in every way." His respectful distance only made Olivia more aware of him, the way his hands looked gripping the reins of his horse, the rare smile that transformed his serious face, the quiet competence with which he managed the ranch and his men. She found herself watching him when he wasn't looking, wondering what it might be like if their arrangement weren't merely a convenient fiction. As June turned to July, news reached them that Theodore Mallory had been called away to San Francisco on business. The search for Olivia seemed to have cooled, though Quinn remained cautious. Mallory's not the type to forget what he considers a debt, he warned when Olivia suggested she might be able to leave soon. And where would you go? Without references or money? He was right, of course. Her teaching credentials were worthless without someone to vouch for her character, and she had nowhere to return to in the East. I can't impose on your kindness forever, she protested. Perhaps I could find work in one of the larger towns, far from here. Quinn's jaw tightened. Is it so terrible here? Are you that eager to leave? The hurt in his voice surprised her. No, that's not what I meant. I don't want to be a burden. You're not a burden, Olivia, He trailed off, looking away. The ranch runs better with you here. The men eat better. The house feels like a home again. The unspoken words hung between them, too fragile to acknowledge directly. Instead, Olivia nodded and said softly, "Then I'll stay a while longer." The Independence Day celebration in Panamint Valley was the first time Olivia had ventured into any semblance of society since her escape. Quinn had been reluctant, but she'd persuaded him that their continued absence would eventually cause more suspicion than their presence. Besides, she'd argued, it's been months, and if we're to convince people we're truly married, we must occasionally act like a normal couple. So they rode into town together, Olivia wearing her best dress, a blue calico that Quinn had purchased from a traveling peddler, and a wide-brimmed hat to shade her face. She was nervous, but also excited to be among people again after the isolation of ranch life. The town hall had been decorated with bunting and flags. Tables groaned under the weight of dishes brought by families from miles around. A fiddler and banjo player provided music in one corner, while children darted between the adults, playing games and sneaking sweets. Quinn Anderson, a plump woman in her 50s, approached them as soon as they entered. "Land sakes, we'd begun to think you'd turned wild out there on that ranch of yours, and this must be the wife we've been hearing whispers about." Olivia felt Quinn tense beside her before his arm slipped around her waist in a protective gesture that felt surprisingly natural. "Mrs. Hollister," he greeted the woman. "Yes, this is my wife, Olivia. Olivia, this is Margaret Hollister. Her husband runs the general store." "Pleased to meet you," Olivia said, extending her hand with what she hoped was a convincing smile. Mrs. Hollister engulfed her hand in both of hers. "My dear, we've all been dying to meet you. Quinn keeping you hidden away all this time positively scandalous. You must tell me everything, where you're from, how you met, all of it." Before Olivia could formulate a response, Quinn intervened. "Perhaps later, Mrs. Hollister. We've only just arrived, and I promised Olivia some punch." As he guided her away, Olivia whispered, "We should have prepared a story." "Just keep it simple," he murmured. "The closer to truth, the better. You're from Boston. We met through my sister in Sacramento, married quickly." Throughout the evening, Olivia found herself repeatedly explaining their whirlwind romance to curious townspeople. With each retelling, the story became more detailed, more intimate. How Quinn had courted her with books of poetry, how she'd fallen in love with his quiet strength, how they'd decided life on the ranch would be their adventure together. Quinn, listening nearby, added his own details occasionally, his hand resting at the small of her back in a gesture that began as part of their charade but gradually felt like something more. They were sharing a plate of apple pie when Olivia froze mid-bite. Across the room, Arnold Pierce had just entered, accompanied by two other men she recognized from Mallory's employ. Quinn, she whispered urgently. He followed her gaze, his expression hardening. Stay calm, we're leaving. Now. But before they could make their exit, Pierce spotted them and made his way over, a predatory smile splitting his face. Well, if it isn't the Andersons, he drawled. Decided to join civilization after all. Quinn positioned himself slightly in front of Olivia. Pierce. Didn't expect to see Mallory's men here tonight. Thought he was in San Francisco. Got back yesterday, Pierce replied, his eyes fixed on Olivia. Mighty interested to hear about your pretty wife here. Don't recall him ever meeting her. No reason he would have, Quinn said evenly. We keep to ourselves. Pierce's smile widened. Funny thing, though, got a letter from Sacramento last week. Friend of mine asking after Quinn Anderson's sister. Seems she never mentioned her brother getting married. Olivia felt the blood drain from her face. Quinn's hand found hers, squeezing tightly. My sister disapproved of our quick wedding, Quinn said smoothly. Thought Olivia was after the ranch. We haven't been on speaking terms since. Pierce looked unconvinced. Is that right? Well, Mr. Mallory would still like to make your acquaintance, Mrs. Anderson. Perhaps you could call on him tomorrow. My wife's indisposed tomorrow, Quinn replied, his voice taking on a dangerous edge. And the next day, and every day after that, Mallory might come calling. The tension between the men crackled like electricity before a storm. Nearby conversations quieted as people sensed the confrontation brewing. I think, Pierce said slowly, that your wife might actually be a thief and a runaway. I think Mr. Mallory would pay handsomely to have that confirmed. Quinn's hand moved to the gun at his hip. Careful, Pierce. That sounds mighty close to calling my wife a liar. Pierce's own hand hovered near his weapon. Maybe that's exactly what I'm doing. The fiddler's music screeched to a halt. Women pulled children behind them. Men stepped away, creating a clear space around the confrontation. Quinn, Olivia said softly, touching his arm, it's not worth bloodshed. He didn't look at her, his eyes locked with Pierce's. Some things are worth fighting for, Olivia. Not like this, she pleaded. Please. The moment stretched, taut as a bowstring, before Quinn finally stepped back. We're leaving, Pierce. I suggest you don't follow. As they moved toward the door, Pierce called after them. Mallory will be paying you a visit, Anderson. Count on it. They rode home in tense silence, pushing the horses harder than usual. Back at the ranch, Quinn immediately began giving orders to his men posting guards, bringing the horses into the barn rather than leaving them in the corrals, checking ammunition supplies. What are you doing? Olivia asked when they were finally alone in the house. Preparing, Quinn answered grimly. Mallory won't let this go now. He'll come with men probably tomorrow. Then I should leave tonight, Olivia insisted. If I'm gone, you can honestly tell them I fled, that you didn't know who I really was. Stop it, Quinn interrupted, his voice sharp. I'm not sending you out there alone. I won't have you fight a war for me. These men are killers, Quinn. They'll burn your ranch to the ground. Let them try. His expression was hard, determined. This isn't just about you anymore, Olivia. This is about me too, about what kind of man I am. What do you mean? Quinn paced the room, agitation in every line of his body. My father built this ranch after escaping from a plantation in Georgia. He was a runaway slave who found freedom in these mountains, who taught himself to read by candlelight, who married my mother and raised us to believe in the dignity of every human being. He stopped, facing her. Mallory thinks he can own people first, the Chinese workers in his mines, now you. My father died fighting that kind of thinking. I won't dishonor his memory by backing down now. Olivia stared at him, seeing him with new eyes. You never told me. It's not something I advertise, Quinn said quietly. Most folks around here knew my father, respected him for what he built, not where he came from. But men like Mallory and Pierce, they'd see only the color of his skin and mine. Moving closer, Olivia reached up to touch his face. Then we'll face them together. I won't run and leave you to face this alone. Something shifted in Quinn's eyes, a softening, a vulnerability she hadn't seen before. His hand came up to cover hers where it rested against his cheek. "Olivia," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "These past months, this pretend marriage. I need you to know it hasn't felt pretend to me, not for a long while." Her heart stuttered in her chest. "Nor to me," she admitted, "though I've tried to tell myself otherwise." Quinn leaned forward, hesitating just a breath away from her lips. "May I kiss my wife, for real this time?" Instead of answering, Olivia closed the distance between them, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that began tentatively but quickly deepened into something more urgent, more honest than anything they had shared before. His arms encircled her, drawing her against the solid warmth of his chest. She could feel his heart beating as rapidly as her own. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Quinn rested his forehead against hers. "Whatever comes tomorrow," he promised, "we face it together." Dawn came too quickly. They had spent most of the night making preparations, securing the house, positioning the ranch hands, creating defensive positions. Olivia had changed from her pretty blue dress into practical trousers and a shirt borrowed from Quinn, her hair braided tightly back. "You should stay inside," Quinn told her as the first rays of sunlight crested the eastern mountains. "I can shoot," she replied, checking the rifle he'd given her. "My father taught me. I won't cower in the bedroom while you risk your life for me." Before Quinn could argue further, one of the ranch hands called out from his lookout position. "Riders coming, at least 8 of them." Through his spyglass, Quinn confirmed their worst fears. "Mallory's at the front, Pierce and 7 gunmen with him." The approaching party stopped just beyond rifle range. Mallory separated from the group, riding forward alone, stopping where he could be heard without coming too close. "Anderson," he called, "send out the woman who calls herself Olivia and we'll leave your ranch standing." Quinn stepped onto the porch, his rifle held casually but ready. "There's no one here by that name, Mallory. Just my wife and my men. Turn around and ride out and we'll forget this misunderstanding." Mallory's laugh carried across the yard. "Your wife is a thief who ran out on a legitimate contract. I paid good money for her services. People aren't property to be bought and sold," Quinn shouted back. "Not in my father's time and not in mine." A tense silence followed before Mallory called again. "I want what's mine, Anderson. Send her out or we're coming in to get her." Quinn's expression was grim as he turned to Olivia, who had come to stand beside him on the porch. "Stay behind me," he murmured. "This is your last chance, Mallory," Quinn called. "There are 6 rifles aimed at you right now. Leave my property and don't come back." Instead of replying, Mallory wheeled his horse around, galloping back to his men. Orders were shouted and the group spread out, preparing to attack from multiple directions. The first shot came from Pierce, whistling past Quinn's head to embed itself in the wooden door behind them. Quinn returned fire, and suddenly the air was filled with the crack of rifles and the acrid smell of gunpowder. Olivia ducked behind an overturned water trough with Quinn, her hands steady despite her fear as she reloaded her weapon. All around the ranch yard, Quinn's men exchanged fire with Mallory's from whatever cover they could find. "They're trying to work their way to the barn," Quinn observed, squeezing off another shot. "If they can set fire to it, the wind will carry the flames to the house." A cry from near the corral told them one of the ranch hands had been hit. Olivia made to move toward him, but Quinn held her back. "Too exposed," he said tersely. "Davis will get to him." Sure enough, another of Quinn's men was belly crawling toward the injured hand, dragging him to safety behind a stack of lumber. The firefight continued for what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes. Two of Mallory's men were down, and Pierce was nursing a wounded arm. But Quinn's side had taken casualties. Davis had been grazed along the ribs, and Jeb was bleeding from a shoulder wound. During a momentary lull, Quinn turned to Olivia. "We're running low on ammunition. If they rush us all at once, we won't be able to hold them off." The grim reality of their situation settled over her. They were outnumbered, and eventually, Mallory's men would overcome their defenses. Even if some of the attackers fell, the survivors would show no mercy. "I could give myself up," Olivia suggested desperately. "If it would save you and your men, no." Quinn's voice was like iron. "That's not an option." Just then, a new sound caught their attention: hoofbeats, many of them, approaching fast from the east. Quinn risked a glance over the trough. "More riders," he reported. "At least a dozen." Olivia's heart sank. If Mallory had called in reinforcements, they were finished. But as the riders came into view, Quinn's expression changed from despair to disbelief. "It's Sheriff Ramsey," he breathed. "And looks like half the men from town with him." The new arrivals thundered into the ranch yard, positioning themselves between Mallory's group and Quinn's defenders. Sheriff Ramsey, a grizzled veteran of the Mexican War, raised his shotgun toward Mallory. "That's enough," he bellowed. "Drop your weapons, all of you." Mallory, his face contorted with rage, pointed at the ranch house. "Sheriff, that man is harboring a runaway, a woman who stole from me." "I know exactly who he's harboring," Ramsey replied evenly. "His wife, Olivia Anderson. Same woman half the town met at the celebration yesterday." "She's not his wife," Mallory sputtered. "She's Olivia Jameson, a schoolteacher who came west on the stage 3 months ago. I purchased her domestic contract at Blackwell's auction." Sheriff Ramsey dismounted, walking to stand directly in front of Mallory. "Funny thing about that auction. Had a telegram from the territorial judge this morning. Seems Blackwell's been conducting illegal human sales disguised as domestic contracts. Judge says those contracts aren't worth the paper they're printed on." Murmurs ran through both groups of men. Olivia felt Quinn's hand find hers, squeezing tightly. "Furthermore," Ramsey continued, "attacking a man's home and family is a hanging offense in this territory. So I suggest you collect your wounded and ride back to town, Mallory. The judge will be arriving on tomorrow's stage to sort this whole mess out, and I expect you'll want to prepare your explanation." For a moment, it seemed Mallory might order his men to fight anyway. But faced with the sheriff and his armed posse, even his thirst for revenge faltered. With a snarled curse, he signaled his remaining men to collect their injured and retreat. As they rode away, Sheriff Ramsey approached the water trough where Quinn and Olivia were still positioned. "You two can come out now," he called, "though I've got some questions that need answering." Inside the house, while Quinn's wounded men were being tended by the doctor who had accompanied the sheriff, Ramsey sat at the kitchen table with Quinn and Olivia. "Mrs. Hollister is the one who alerted me," he explained, accepting the coffee Olivia poured. "Said something didn't seem right about how nervous you two were at the celebration, especially when Mallory's men showed up." Then she remembered hearing about that schoolteacher who disappeared the same night as Blackwell's auction. Olivia's hands trembled slightly as she set down the coffee pot. "Are you going to arrest me, Sheriff?" Ramsey studied her for a long moment before shaking his head. "For what?" "Running from illegal bondage. The territorial judge has been trying to shut down Blackwell's operation for months. Your case might finally give him the evidence he needs." Relief flooded through Olivia, making her knees weak. Quinn steadied her with a hand at her elbow, guiding her to sit beside him. "There's something else you should know," Ramsay continued, looking between them. "Your marriage. I'm guessing it's not exactly legal, given the circumstances." Quinn and Olivia exchanged glances. "It was necessary," Quinn began. "For her protection, I'm not judging," Ramsay interrupted. "But if you want it to hold up to scrutiny, you might want to make it official before the judge arrives. He's also a justice of the peace, authorized to perform legal marriages." The sheriff drained his coffee cup and stood. "I'll leave my deputy and a few men here tonight, just in case Mallory gets any more foolish ideas. The rest of us will head back to town and make sure the judge's welcome is properly prepared." After Ramsay departed, the ranch settled into an exhausted quiet. The wounded were resting, the remaining men taking turns standing watch. Quinn found Olivia in the bedroom, staring out the window at the distant mountains stained gold by the setting sun. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. She turned to him, her expression unreadable. "The sheriff suggested we make our marriage legal. I heard." Quinn stepped closer, taking her hands in his. "Olivia, I would be honored to truly be your husband, but only if that's what you want. Now that Mallory's scheme has been exposed, you're free. You could go anywhere, do anything." "Is that what you want?" she asked. "For me to go?" "No." The word was rough with emotion. "God help me, I want you to stay. These past months with you, even with the danger, even with the pretense, have been the happiest of my life." Olivia's eyes filled with tears. "When I came west, I thought I was traveling toward a new beginning, a teaching position, independence, respect. Instead, I found myself at an auction block being sold like cattle." She reached up to touch his face. "But then I found you, or you found me. And despite everything, I can't regret the path that brought me here to this ranch, to you." Quinn drew her close, his arms encircling her waist. "Is that a yes, Olivia Jameson? Will you marry me properly this time?" "Yes," she whispered against his lips. "Yes, Quinn Anderson, I will marry you." The territorial judge, a stern man named Holloway with keen eyes and a reputation for fairness, arrived the next day as promised. After hearing testimonies from Olivia, Quinn, and several witnesses from town regarding Blackwell's auction practices, he issued warrants for both Blackwell and Mallory. "Human trafficking disguised as labor contracts," he declared with disgust. "It's slavery by another name, and I won't have it in this territory." That evening, with the ranch hands, the sheriff, and several townspeople as witnesses, Judge Holloway performed a simple but legal marriage ceremony in the main room of the ranch house. Olivia wore her blue calico dress with wildflowers in her hair. Quinn had shaved and donned his best shirt, looking uncharacteristically nervous as he repeated his vows. "By the authority vested in me by the territorial government," Judge Holloway pronounced, "I now declare you husband and wife." As Quinn kissed her their first kiss, as a truly married couple, Olivia felt as though her journey had finally reached its destination. The path had been fraught with danger and uncertainty, but it had led her here, to this man, this place that had become more home to her than anywhere she'd ever lived. That night, for the first time, they shared the bedroom not as a matter of pretense, but as husband and wife. Their lovemaking was tender at first, then passionate, a physical expression of the feelings that had grown between them over the months of their unusual courtship. Afterward, lying in Quinn's arms with her head on his chest, Olivia thought about the strange twist of fate that had brought her to this moment. "What are you thinking?" Quinn murmured, stroking her hair. "That sometimes the worst day of your life can lead to the best," she replied. "If I hadn't been desperate enough to answer that false teaching advertisement, if I hadn't been stranded without funds, if I hadn't been at that terrible auction." "If you hadn't been brave enough to run," Quinn added. If you hadn't been kind enough to hide me, she countered. He kissed the top of her head. I think my father would have called it providence. In the morning, Judge Holloway departed for Panamint with the sheriff, carrying documentation of Blackwell's illegal activities and Mallory's attack on the ranch. Before he left, he handed Olivia an official-looking paper. Your teaching certificate for the territory, he explained, based on your education credentials from Boston. Panamint's been without a proper school teacher for too long. The position is yours if you want it. Olivia looked at Quinn, who smiled encouragingly. It's only 3 days a week, the judge continued. Wouldn't interfere too much with your duties as Mrs. Anderson. Thank you, Olivia said, clutching the certificate. I would be honored to accept. As summer turned to fall and fall to winter, life at Sidewinder Ranch settled into a rhythm that suited them both. 3 days a week, Quinn would drive Olivia to town to teach at the small schoolhouse. The other days, they worked together on the ranch, Olivia tending the house and garden, Quinn managing the horses and cattle. In the evenings, they would read aloud to each other by the fire, or Quinn would play the harmonica while Olivia worked on a quilt she was making in the pattern his mother had taught his sister. Word came that Theodore Mallory had fled the territory rather than face charges, and Blackwell had been sentenced to 5 years in the territorial prison. The danger that had brought them together had passed, but the bond it had forged remained stronger than ever. On their first anniversary, Quinn presented Olivia with a deed to the ranch, amended to include her name alongside his. Equal partners, he said as she traced her fingers over the formal script. In everything. I have something for you too, Olivia replied, taking his hand and placing it gently on her abdomen. In about 7 months, Sidewinder Ranch will have a new resident. Quinn's expression transformed from confusion to wonder to joy in the space of a heartbeat. He gathered her in his arms, lifting her off her feet in his enthusiasm. A baby, he breathed, setting her down carefully as though she had suddenly become fragile. Are you certain? Olivia laughed at his protective gesture. Quite certain. Dr. Miller confirmed it yesterday when I was in town. We're having a child, Quinn. That night, as they lay in bed discussing names and making plans, Quinn grew suddenly serious. My father never got to see his grandchildren, he said quietly. He died before my sister's boys were born. He would be proud of you, Olivia assured him. Of the man you are, the life you've built, the stand you took. Quinn nodded, his hand resting protectively over her still flat stomach. I want our child to know that story, how his grandfather escaped bondage to build a free life, how his mother fled from a man who thought he could own her, how love is stronger than chains. Our children will know, Olivia promised. And they'll understand the price of freedom and the value of courage. In early summer of 1873, Olivia gave birth to a son they named Frederick, after Quinn's father. He had Quinn's dark curls and Olivia's blue eyes, and from his first cry, he seemed to embody the fierce independence of both his parents. As Quinn held his son for the first time, looking down at the tiny face with an expression of awe, Olivia thought again of that desperate night when she had fled from Blackwell's auction house, barefoot and terrified. How could she have known then that her escape would lead not just to safety, but to love, family, and a home that was truly her own? 2 years later, their daughter Margaret joined the family, named after Mrs. Hollister, who had become a dear friend, and whose suspicions at the Independence Day celebration had ultimately brought the sheriff to their aid. By the time Frederick was 5 and starting school with his mother, as his teacher Sidewinder Ranch had prospered under Quinn and Olivia's joint management. They had added a new wing to the house, expanded the horse breeding operation, and established a reputation for both hospitality and fair dealing throughout the territory. On cool evenings, they would often sit on the porch watching their children play in the yard, marveling at how their lives had unfolded. "You ever regret it?" Quinn asked once. "Coming west, all you endured?" Olivia leaned her head against his shoulder, watching Frederick show his little sister how to feed a carrot to one of the gentler ponies. "Not for a moment," she answered truthfully. "Every step, even the painful ones, led me here, led me home." As the sun set behind the mountains that had witnessed both her flight from bondage and her journey to love, Olivia Anderson knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be with the man who had hidden her, protected her, and loved her enough to make her not just his pretend wife, but his true partner in all things. The man who had once been her refuge had become her home, and together they had built a life neither of them could have imagined on that fateful night when a desperate woman fled from the man who bought her, and a compassionate cowboy decided to hide her instead.